you to get the kind of information that you need to make your work site safe on the topic that Jack is going to be talking about. Now, the gentleman that's going to be up here for the next few hours has been around the horn. He's worked for lots of companies. He's worked for very large companies, Fortune 500 companies. He's published a lot. But what I think is more important, that he has actually gone out and worked with organizations your size. He's worked with schools to get school hazards, amputation hazards in schools fixed. He's gone out on his own as a public service to work in stores to find things that can fall on people's heads and hurt them. This guy really knows what he's talking about, and he has a passion for the business and safety. I consider him to be one of the ultimate safety guys that I know, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend Jack Podojil. Come on up, Jack.
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me over there? I usually do not like to put on mics because sometimes I overpower them. So as long as you can hear me okay and you can hear me over here okay, we're going to be in great shape. As Jim said, my name is Jack Podojil. I've been in the safety and health field for the last 38 years. And I currently teach for the OSHA training institutes at UCSD and also Cal State Dominguez Hills. But one thing for sure, when you start looking at machinery, understand that 98% of all machines in factories have one or more unsafe conditions to them. So I don't care if you buy a drill press, a brand new one. For example, you buy a brand new Delta drill press. It's going to come to you without a chip shield. It's going to come to you without power outage protection. It's going to come to you without an emergency stop. And when you start looking at all the different types of injuries that are occurring, the reason that they are occurring is simply because the machine is unsafe. How many machine operators do I have in here? Got any machine operators? Are you all owners of companies and stuff like this? Well, OSHA started an initiative a long, long time ago, and it was on amputation hazards concerning power presses. Well, what they ended up learning is over the period of time, we missed the boat because people were being scalped by drill presses. People were losing their hands into other types of machinery, pyramid rolls, iron workers. All of these other machines that we take for granted ends up losing a lot of fingers. So when you start looking at this session, what I want to do is I want you to understand the hazards associated with it, some of the motions. I'll give you a good one on this issue. You're having a good day. Anybody ever see this thing and you're out there with your family and you're over here at the mall? And as you're going into the mall with your youngsters and stuff like this, your grandkids, whatever, you come up this thing called an elevator. You ever see this thing called an elevator? So you got this elevator and the doors are wide on open, and all of a sudden, them doors start shutting. And people normally do what? Go a little bit quicker. What is the next thing somebody does when they get to that door as that door's about ready to close? You're right, stick your arm in. Why would you stick your arm into a door that is closing? See, we take it for granted that every other time that door opened. But you do not know, for example, if somebody turned around and performed the maintenance on it. You do not know if it has a light curtain on it. You do not know if it has a pressure-sensitive device. But for the same token, why don't you all come down to the garage with me and I'll open up my car door and you stick your arm in and I'll slam it. Right? What's the difference? We don't know. We take things for granted. And when we do, guess what? Even on that little elevator door, you still have about that much steel you have to penetrate before you get to the sensor. And people become amputated. Parts of bodies become amputated. A good example is a guy was talking to this lady up in New York, just talking about machine hazards and different motions and stuff like this. He was talking to her standing in front of the elevator. As the elevator doors start closing, he starts leaning in a little bit closer. He's hoping it has what kind of a guarding device on it, a light curtain. So as it keeps closing, he keeps moving forward. Finally, the door shut, popped off his head. The head goes in the elevator with the lady, and the head rides up. Then, when they get down, they open up the doors, and the body falls down in the pit. But you know what, folks? We look at elevators as just normal day of business, right? So we're going to talk about trying to identify some of the hazards in your equipment. This is only a 2.5-hour session, so I need somebody to be part of my team. Who wants to be part of my team? That means I can speak on this subject for 7 days, nonstop, 24 hours a day. So if somebody doesn't stop me in 50 minutes, 50 to 55 minutes, you don't have to throw nothing at me. But if you just do me a little sign, guess what? I'll give you a 10-minute break. If not, we're just going to keep on trucking. All right? So who wants to give me that little sign? All right, we're talking for about 3 hours then. Sincerely, please write down on a piece of paper the word team. Because when you're starting to work on your machine guarding projects, and I don't care what plant I walk into, there are tons of them. And OSHA, out of the top 10 citable items that OSHA goes after, 3 out of those are machine guarding related, and the 4th one is a lockout tagout program. So if you don't have your machines guarded, most of the time, guess what OSHA searches for? Grinders. Why? Why does OSHA go for grinders? It's easy. It's there, everybody has one. But all OSHA has to do is find one unsafe condition on a machine, and you have to go fix every other machine out there. The problem is, when I used to work for OSHA, we'd cite one and that's all they fix. You come back on a follow-up, you go, why didn't you fix the rest of your machines? So I'm still looking for my teammate. Together everyone achieves more. Who wants to help me? Nobody. You will? You know what? Just because of this thing called identifying stuff, machines and stuff, I tell you, the most important person you want to know is that machine operator. That's the most important person. That person knows machinery, knows how he's got to set it up or she's got to set it up, knows exactly. You know when operators tell you you've got a problem? When they start putting cardboard all over things, hanging plastic over things. Operators will tell you. So together, you're going to need to have those operators in your pocket. You're going to need to have those maintenance personnel in your pocket. Because as you're going to learn this morning, 1910-219P1 says, every power transmission, part of a power transmission apparatus, belts, pulleys, gear, chains, sprockets, bearing hangers, has to be inspected at a frequency not to exceed 60 days, has to be kept in alignment at all times, has to be kept free from excessive rust or grease. Now, if I went out to your place of employment, would you have that record? If your answer is no, here comes number 2 citation. All right? And if you start really looking at how many people are being cited, machine guarding, if you go to www.osha.gov and you go to the news section, you're going to find out that they cite a lot of people on machinery, just about every time they walk through the door. So, sir, thanks for being a team member, right? I wrote a book. It's called I Am a Teacher, Motivational Quotes for Teachers, okay?
Thank you.
So thank you for partaking in this endeavor. Now, your job is not only to shut me up, your job is to make sure they all come back. So it's a two-way street. Amputations are amongst the leading cause of people being injured, okay? Leading cause. Why? Because when you run a machine, you are operating it, you are messing with the cutters, you're messing with the tooling. And how many, if I asked you in here, has all your machines, for every machine you have in there, how many have their owner's operator's manual for that machine? For every machine you have. If you do not have the owner's operator's manual for every machine, you cannot possibly have trained or educated that operator. It's impossible. So there comes number 3. So we're just going to walk down this list. But one thing for sure, 18,000 amputations, laceration, crushing injuries happen every year, and at least 800 people are killed. I was out in San Diego last week teaching, and I had 1 day free. So one of the insurance carriers said, Jack, can you go out and take a look at this place and look at their machines? I said, sure. So I went out there. I said, why are we going out there? How many got a conveyor in here? Anybody got a conveyor? Gentleman had a conveyor that turned around and was jammed. And what he ended up doing as he was trying to clear the jam because he failed the lock, tag, and what's the magical word? Tryout. He unjammed it, but his arms were inside the conveyor and he lost both arms. But there was a positive side of it because the employer said, well, you know, it was sad that he lost his arms. But the good thing about it is once they install his prosthesis, we may hire him back. Understand, the guy has no arms. People have no fingers. And one thing for sure, just like this island where you're all family, when you're in a factory, that's all family. And I usually ask people to take a look at your hands. Because if you're the decision makers, if you're the people that are supervising, if you're the operators, understand this. You hold the life of that worker and their families in your hands. Now, I work for large corporations. I work for Boeing, Allied Signal, Lockheed, the biggest of the biggest. And I can tell you this. One time, 2 of my workers got injured. And it was on something that I wrote up that wasn't corrected. And as such, it destroyed me. Meaning, I was their corporate person. But I wrote something up and I didn't get it totally fixed. So what are you going to do when you leave this 2.5-hour session and you go back and you understand that 98% of your machines are not going to make it? The next thing people are going to say is this: we don't have the money. You ever hear that one? We don't have the money. But do you have the money to pay OSHA citations? Because once you pay the OSHA citation, you're going to pay to get the machine fixed as well. OSHA, Hawaii OSHA, has a free consultation program for you. You don't have to go out and spend a lot of money. They'll come out and work with you. They have all been trained in machine safeguarding. And as such, please write this one down. OSHA is my friend. You ever hear that? People go, no, they're going to cite. Well, then don't violate the law. If you're violating the law, they're going to cite you. If you're not violating the law, what's your fear? I can tell you that over 800 deaths happen every year because of people being injured, because of machinery not being guarded, because people don't have good bid specs, bid specifications. And as such, when you start looking at this thing called amputations, people go, well, how about those doors? How about the trash compactors? Is that a machine? Sure. How about if you're in a construction environment and you have a compressor out on your job site and you open those side doors open so the compressor can get air and you got exposed belt and pulley there? Is that a hazard? Sure. What is the most predictable injury that could occur if I stuck my hand between a bell and pulley? What's the most predictable injury? Amputation, right? Amputation will cost you starting around $7,000 unless you had knowledge that you knew that thing was unsafe and you didn't do anything to fix it and somebody loses their fingers. That's called a willful violation. Once you know there's a standard in existence, it is your responsibility to go out and identify those hazards. It is management's responsibility to identify them. And the same thing, you're never going to fix everything overnight. So the next thing I'd like you to think about is, what is your workaround procedures? Once you identify an unsafe condition, what are you going to do to work around it until such time as you can fix it? What are you going to do? Because you're going to have to start looking at this stuff. This is a realistic issue. Machine guarding and this emphasis program is happening across the United States. Happening across the United States. People are tired of watching people get in. So many machines result from saws. They didn't have that before. So now it's saws, now it's presses. Anybody got a little bearing press, little H-frame bearing press? Has a little jack in it, you're jacking it up. And if you have an automatic jack, guess what? That's one thing. How about that little hand jack? You got a little hand jack and all of a sudden you put in a little frame. Well, now you made that little frame and that little hand jack an H-frame hydraulic press which comes underneath the ANSI standard. And as such, you must guard that machine from flying parts. The other issue is, every one of those little floor jacks that you're using out there has to be inspected at least every 6 months. And it has to be documented. And if you're not doing that, these are easy hits. So we start looking at that. You can reduce it, and how can you reduce it? By putting a program together. Programs are very easy to put together, but you're going to have the magical word called buy-in. You're going to have the buy-in from top-level management. You're going to have buy-in from maintenance. Any facility people in here? Nobody from facilities? Normally they're the first to go. You're a facility guy, you're overhead. So therefore, overhead's time to go, right? We ain't making enough money, cost us. Well, guess what? The facility people are your most important people. What are you doing to keep your machines in good condition? How are you keeping things in alignment? So when we start looking at it, you got to develop this program. How many are in here are buyers, buying machinery? Most buyers don't buy what you want, they buy for the cheapest thing they can find. But yet, they don't know what they're buying. Nobody's ever educated them into machinery or what is required on the machine. So you have to put that program together. Part of that program for your 3-shift operation is having somebody off of every shift playing an important part of working together. A good example is this. I was out at a client's location not too long ago, and I'm walking in and they know I'm hitting machinery. So as I'm going through, you don't think the floor knows what's happening? The floor was telling everybody else what I was looking for. So they're going back on, putting the product back on. I get around this one area and somebody had the interlock in their hand. They were just screwing it back to the door when I walked around. Drops the Allen wrench. So naturally, I'm a seasoned guy, 38 years in this field. Just right out and say, hey, this is a little loose. You mind using that Allen wrench to go ahead and tighten it up? And he says, well, we're not allowed to touch those. Really? It's a little loose. It's your life. Well, we can't touch this. Maintenance has to do it. So we call a maintenance guy over and say, hey, maintenance guy, you guys check these machines? Yeah, this guy takes them off. Good. So I said, where's the supervisor? So who should have been written up? The operator, the maintenance guy, or the supervisor? All three. Most of the time, we don't write up management. We go, and they go, well, why are you doing it? Who's supposed to be managing your program? Here's 4 elements of your program, and I'd like you to write them down or really consider them. Here's your 4 lines of defense. First thing you must have is a program. You must have one. That program's going to be owner's operator's manual. That program's going to be training. That program's going to be job safety and health analysis. That program element's going to be placarding. All of that is part of that program. So you got to have one. The next thing it's got to be is in writing. So if I went to your facilities or your locations and I asked to see your owner's operator's manual and your maintenance manual and your safety manual, could you give me them? If the answer is no, you got a problem. The issue comes in this. You can never properly educate a person unless they have read and understood the manual. I don't care if you buy a brand new car today. It comes with a what? A manual. One thing that we do well in the United States, we throw them away until something happens. We don't need them to install things. We don't need them to fix anything until the clock in your car doesn't work anymore. And then you go, how did I have to set that thing? So then you start looking for the what? The manual. Well, a drill press is not a drill press. A mill is not a mill. And a pyramid roller is not a pyramid roller. They all come with safety instructions, which means you have to have that as part of your program. So I got to have a program, has to be in writing, has to be effectively communicated. If you're not educating your people, you just can't hire somebody and say, well, I've been running a mill for 15 years. It's always in increments of 5. You ever notice that? We've been doing it this way for 20 years. Nobody got hurt yet. So the issue is this. You got to educate them, which means if you bring them in and you're running a Mazak, you're running a CNC machine or whatever, they have to know the safety precautions of that machine. So first thing I got to do is have a program. Second thing it's got to do is be in writing. Third thing it's got to do is be effectively communicated. And that 4th element is the critical element, is it has to be enforced. Now I'll give you a little scenario also, because people say, well, if they get hurt, they get workers' compensation. You ever hear that? Not if there's negligence involved. If they can prove that you knew about it and that you didn't do everything to protect the person, and that person gets injured, they can come right up through that exclusive remedy of workers' compensation to sue you personally. So hopefully you have that program in place, because that's where you need to be. You need to have them, you need to have maintenance programs, you need to have all of these things happen. Next thing you got to look at is, for example, effective machine guarding programs. They're your fundamental. If they're producing the part for you, if you're making the product, that's your livelihood. So why would you not want to have your machines properly guarded? And this thing called guard, understand the word guard means I can't reach over, under, around, or through to get into something. That's not what OSHA's saying. OSHA's not saying that kind of stuff. OSHA's saying you're going to look at the hazard and you're going to protect that operator from a hazard. How many ever see a drill press? We see a drill press? Good. It's got a little rotating chuck, does it not? It's got a little cutter in it, does it not? And most of the time people say, well, you got to guard the point of operation. You ever hear that? Well, if I am using a drill press and I am boring into a piece of metal, and the point of operation is the tip of that cutter going into that metal, if I'm boring into it, can I touch it? The answer is no. It's guarded by location. So what's my next hazard? I got a revolving cutter. I've got chips. And chips and coolant, sometimes I get oil mist there. Chips and coolant together are called swarf. So you need to write that word down, swarf. Because if you are generating swarf and you are using cutting fluids and you are using coolant, you are also generating hazardous waste. So how are you controlling your chips and what are you doing with them and where are they going? If you're just putting them in and throw them out in the trash bin, you got a problem. So all of this program happens. Fingers, hairs, clothing. What do you go out there as a manager, and like I said, I used to go out through my plants and I'd see a machinist running a machine with a ring on it. I'd see people with long hair unrestrained running a drill press. And we go, what's wrong with this program? Why aren't people taking care of themselves? You know why? We get used to it. You get used to your home, you get used to your house, you get used to your garage, you don't see the hazards. So when a fresh set of eyes comes in to work, they see those hazards. Why do you think compliance people are more finding more stuff than you do? Because they're not used to your work environment. But OSHA is a friend. If we didn't have OSHA, understand that OSHA's been in existence since 71. And as such, in 1970-71, when the standards were formed, and it's the ANSI standards, so if you have all these machines, you need the ANSI standards to them too. So if you have a milling, drilling, and boring machine, you need ANSI B118. Why? Because it's part of your program. It tells you how to run the machine, what's necessary to stay safe. Because OSHA don't put all of these machines in their standards. They cover a general standard. They get very much involved with wood. Anybody have a belt sander out there? Be with me. You got a belt sander? Okay. OSHA says that the unused portion of the belt shall be guarded. The word shall is mandatory. If I went out to your belt sander, whose is it? Who made it? Delta? Rockwell? Big belt sander? Thin belt? Wide belt? Wide belt. If you bought that wide belt sander, you're going to see you got about a throat opening about that big. All right? Well, if I'm only cutting using that small portion of the belt, what needs to be guarded? The rest of that. So how do you guard it? Because you cannot go to the manufacturer and buy it. They don't make it. You're going to have to design it, you're going to have to build it, and you're going to have to make sure that it's safe because you can't buy it. You got a disc sander, same way.
So when you build these safety apparatus, who approves it, or how do you know it's safe?
Use good engineering practices. For example, I'm not trying to say it. We do a lot of machine safeguarding. Why? It came out of your environment. If I find all these machines unsafe, who's got to fix it? Well, safety department. Well, I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to advise you on how to do it. There is a book that they were sitting in the back here. So hopefully you all picked one up. If not, I would pick one up. All right, this little book right here, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and it shows you the different types of guards, guarding devices, the advantages and disadvantages of them. All right, and as such, it gives you some guidance on how to build it. Now, the other thing is, what I always tell people, if you ever have a question, get a hold of OSHA. If you also have a question, call me. I'll help you out. We don't charge for that. You got a question on something, if it can protect somebody else's life, can protect your finger, we should all be on the same team, should we not? Because most machinery is unsafe, 98% of it. So when we start looking at this stuff, to prevent amputations, you've got to have all of these hazards and all of these things going. A good example is, let me get to a slide here. They often occur when people are also conducting maintenance. How many have heard the word lockout, tagout, tryout? Okay? So can a mechanic just go inside of a machine and leave the machine running? Or is there other protections that they have to take? They have to take other protection. What is that protection? You ever watch people running machines with gloves? Sure you do. How many times in your own shop, if you have milling machines and you have these big cutters, do you turn around and give people gloves, Kevlar gloves or something to handle the cutters, or you just let them pick those cutters up with their hands? If you let them pick them up with their hands, what are you looking for? Somebody's going to get cut. Somebody's going to get a severe enough cut. And if you don't get that swarf out of that cut, you're going to get an infection. Next thing you know, you're going to have an amputation by the doctor. Doctor's going to take that out. So, but yet if you follow 1910-132 of the OSHA standard, it says that you as the employer have the responsibility to go out and assess the entire work area to find out exactly what kind of personal protective equipment is required. And same way with safety glasses on a machine. Does that prevent an amputation? We're talking everything here. Safety shoes. People go, well, I got to wear safety shoes. Good. What standard do they meet? And how do you make them wear them? And how do you keep them in good condition? So let's take a look at OSHA. Hawaii OSHA has adopted federal OSHA standards. And federal OSHA standards are entertaining. And the reason being, it says, watch, 212A1. See that one in your book? Put a big mark by it because it covers every machine out there, including a pencil sharpener. So whatever machine you can see out there, just because you go to 213, that's talking about wood. How many have a woodworking bandsaw and you cut metal on it or cut plastic on it? If you're doing that, you're misusing that piece of equipment. Why? The manufacturer didn't design it for that. So therefore, if I went into your shop and you're cutting metal, I should see a big metal cutting saw, and I should see a speed chart sitting on the side of that thing telling me exactly what blade to use and exactly what speed to run the machine at. But if I go up to these little shops and I see these little Delta Powermatic jets, that's a woodworking piece of machinery. They're woodworking manufacturers. It's never intended for you to change the blade, because if you get somebody hurt, what do you think those manufacturers are going to say? You misused my machine. It was never designed for that. You misused it, so who becomes liable? Hopefully you're thinking, gee, it may be me. And if you're a safety person, I highly suggest you learn this subject. So when we start looking at it, types of guarding, how many have two-hand controls on their machines? Two-hand trips, two-hand controls. Anybody? Okay, seeing a hand back there. One of the things, as soon as you put a two-hand control on a machine, if I went to your facility, I should see a stop time measuring device. Okay, it's a device that goes on both buttons. It has a timer in it. In other words, once I trip that machine, my hand moves at over 67.5 inches per second. So, wherever that two-hand control is, wherever that light curtain is, once I hit that control, it's got to be able to sense me going into that machine and stop before I can get there. Which means you need a stop time measuring device. Now, the only place you're going to see OSHA talk about it is in their Power Press standard. So what happens? 212 comes into play. So let's take a look at that little 212. It says this. Here's what most people read, and let me read it to you. One method of machine guarding shall be provided to protect the operator. That's what they read. Okay? Well, the operator got to keep their finger out. Well, what if you walk up next to the operator? Who's protecting you? What are you doing to keep your fingers out? OSHA says 212A1 for every type of machine you could possibly think of, including that little paper shredder that may be sitting in your office. We had a top executive one day in one of my plants. We get called out of this accident investigation, and he's raising all kinds of dickens. He had on the little tie. He started shredding up some paper. He gets next to that little machine, and guess what it starts doing? Gobbling the necktie. The fun part about it is the necktie wasn't one of those pop-ons. It was one of them tied to it. And this is a good industrial shredder. So as his head starts getting closer and closer down to that thing, he's hoping that it doesn't have anything more than a 1/8 inch opening. So he gets done, he goes, look at this. And then how about this thing called an emergency stop? They didn't have one. Every machine in America has to have an emergency stop. Has to be red in color, yellow background. How many of you have seen these little toggle switches out there? You see them, little push, pull button, stuff like that? Well, that guy, he was trying to find it. And you know where they put that little start stop button? On the back end of the machine. So as it's gobbling him up, he's going, I'm in big trouble. So yeah, you are. So after we got him out of there, and we got him all settled down, we took his tie, and we put it back together in a nice frame, and we presented it to him. And I wasn't too happy of a guy that day. He goes, what are you doing this to me for? Next time you'll remember, right? Because he shopped at Nordy's. You don't shop at Nordy's and get a 29-cent tie. You know, you pay good money. All right, so OSHA says this. One or more methods of machine guarding shall be provided to protect the operator and other employees in the machine area from hazards created by such as The point of operation. Well, we just talked where the point of operation is. That's where that cutter, that blade, whatever you're doing, that piece of wood is touching that sanding belt. That's the point of operation. But it also goes on to say what? Ingoing nip points, rotating parts, flying chips and sparks. So I can never hit you with a chip. I can never hit you with a spark. I have to control those. How do you control those? You control those by using a chip shield. So if I put a chip shield on a machine, understand that that chip shield cannot create a hazard in itself either. So the guard or guarding device cannot create a hazard. So how I'm back to guarding your machine. So I come up to your little sanding belt, and I'm looking at your sanding belt. I know I got a hazard. We both agree, correct? It's wherever that thing is touching. So I got this unused portion. My hands run against it. They're gonna get hurt. So now I got to build a shield. So how am I going to build this shield? A lot of times people say, well, I'll use plexiglass. You ever hear somebody say plexiglass? Well, that ain't going to do anything for you except cause you to have a miserable time when it explodes. You're going to have to use, the word is polycarbonate. Some of you hear the word Lexan. Lexan is a trade name for General Electric. That's General Electric's trade name, Lexan. What you need is polycarbonate. Now, if you drill through polycarbonate, because I'm watching what OSHA's telling me here, guard's got to create it from chips. How many have ever seen somebody has a big, nice CNC machine, and all of a sudden, right where the screws are going through the housing, you start seeing little cracks? You know why? Because when the manufacturer built that, they didn't put any rubber next to it, any silicone or anything else. You put a piece of metal against Lexan, polycarbonate, and you tighten it up, sooner or later you're going to find these cracks. How many's got a Biesmeyer table saw? Little Biesmeyer table saw. If you have one of them woodworking saws, it's got a blade, well, it's got a cover on it about that big, got a small bracket on the top. If you look at a Biesmeyer, it's got 4 distinct crack points to it. Every time. Why? It wasn't designed right. So how do you design it? You got to take good engineering practices with it. So you think I need an engineer part of my team? Yeah. You think I need to find out if there's any vibration going in the machine? Just think of the old days. We used to turn around and put tachometers on machines. We used to know when the thing was going to fail. We used to look at the life expectancy of the machine. We don't do that no more. We have not gotten better. We've gotten worse. So when we start looking at this, it says, guards shall be affixed to the machine where possible or secured elsewhere. Now, according to American National Standards, all manufacturers have to do is show you a place to mount it. It's up to you to mount it. They don't sell it to you. It's called, the word is called an accessory. You can buy a brand new Delta drill press today. And you're saying, why am I beating up on Delta? I'm not. They're all the same. Okay? But if you went to Delta, you're going to pay about $2,000 for an industrial drill press, top-of-the-line drill press. It's coming to you without power outage protection. Everybody know how to check for power outage protection? If I give you anything, I'll give you this. I'm going to go up to my machine. If I got a plug cord connected, if I got a Bridgeport mill or whatever, if I go up to that machine, first thing I'm going to do is make sure it's safe to operate. I'm going to put on my trusty safety glasses because I need to protect my eyes. And what else do I need if I'm running a machine? Face shield. People go, well, I got safety glasses on. Well, where's your face shield? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the machine. Just going to turn it on. I'm going to let the machine power up. Once the machine powers up, without touching that start-stop button, I'm simply going to unplug it or hit the disconnect and shut it down. I'm going to let that machine power down. Once it powers down, I'm simply going to plug it back into the wall, or I'm going to turn the knife switch back on, and chances are, unless you have magnetic contactors in there, that machine's going to restart. And yet OSHA, when they did this standard, they only put it in, guess where? The woodworking standard. So you cannot go by this guide of what OSHA's saying. You have to understand that if you have a machine, you need an ANSI standard. Because every American National Standard out there, and I can tell you because I sit on them, states that you must have emergency stop. OSHA says it's red in color. NFPA 79 electrical for machinery says it's red in color with a yellow background. You got any new machines out there? You've seen them coming with a red in color, yellow background. Because too many times on older machines, you got a lot of reds out there. So what do you hit first? So OSHA turns around and says, hey, if you cannot put it there, that guard or guarding device cannot create a hazardous cell. So isn't it important to know how far my distance that I'm going to put my two-hand controls? Because that's a guarding what? Is that a guard or a device? It's a device. Who's it protect? Who's it protect? Come on, help me out. Helps who?
The operator.
The operator. That's right. It doesn't help anybody else. So if you've got more than one operator standing there, the supervisor comes over there, your buddy comes over there to talk with you, you need 2 sets of controls. You get 3 people standing around, 3 sets of controls, all tied into each other. Now this thing called a light curtain, you ever see that? Photocell, electronic light curtains, guard shall not create a hazardous cell. Chances are you got them on your machines. People went out there and told you it's the best thing, increases production. The problem what's wrong with that light curtain? What does it do for you? Prevents you from what? Reaching in. Doesn't prevent anything from flying out. So if you have